Owl went missing 2 weeks ago. Normally, Pussycat wouldn't worry about him. Owl could take care of himself, and sometimes he landed jobs that would make him vanish for days. But he had never been gone this long, and Pussycat's intuition screeched that something wicked had befallen him. That was the nature of the game, of course. Assassins for hire could disappear just as easily as their targets, but Owl and Pussycat were the best in the business. Their aliases were whispered with reverence and fear throughout the underbelly of London. If there was a hit that was judged impossible by every other cutthroat in the city, Owl and Pussycat could get the job done. That also meant there was competition who would love to snuff out the deadly duo, and one rival had attempted to do so. After pieces of him were delivered to other hitmen around town as a warning, no one had pursued the pair since. But this was different. When Owl and Pussycat were together, they were untouchable. Apart, Pussycat could only imagine what traps were set for her partner. She owed much to Owl. He had swept her up from the streets, taken in a poor, mangy girl with no family or home, and rescued her from the workhouse or the brothel. He was the only one who ever made her smile, playing silly songs on his guitar, pilfering little trinkets to bring back to her, teaching her all the most fashionable dances. Not that they'd ever attend any public affair at which they could dance. When Owl didn't come home after 5 days, Pussycat began prowling every dank and dreary cesspool of London to get on lead on where he may have been spotted. After a week and a half of dead ends and false tips, desperation led her to an underworld barkeep named Snout Robinson, not an ironic name by any means. He was a bloated boar of a man, with piggish eyes and a gold ring in his nose. "Aye, I seen him," Snout said. "Few weeks ago. Seemed off his box, almost sick-like. But he left me something. Said someone might come looking for him and to give it to her. Seeing you's the only one come asking for him, I guess he meant you." Snout handed over a leather purse to Pussycat, who instantly recognized it as Owl's. She pocketed the purse and turned to leave. "Hey, missy." Snout lowered his voice. "I've heard rumors. The Morbids may have gotten to him." Hot pinpricks stabbed at Pussycat's skin as the dreaded M word echoed in her ears. Owl had warned her about the Morbids. They were relentless. They were undetectable. Once they targeted you, you were gone. No matter how sly you were, no matter how far you'd run, the Morbids would find you. But no, it couldn't happen to Owl. She gave Snout a dark glare before she exited to the safety of night's black shroud. Inside Owl's purse were 2 items. The first was a scrap of paper that had been torn from a book. Upon it read, "There was an old man of New York who murdered himself with a fork, but nobody cried, though he very soon died, for that silly old man of New York." The other object she stuffed into her coat pocket and rubbed its cool, smooth surface repeatedly over the following days. She massaged it in her palm as she stowed away on a merchant boat to America. She held it as she hid in a crate and was carried onto the docks by the unaware ship crew. She held it as she wandered the grungy streets of New York City, sniffing out any clues as to the old man indicated in that ridiculous poem, or any clues to finding Owl. The object was a silver spoon with the word Runcible engraved on the handle. For some reason, Pussycat had a feeling that her life, and Owl's, depended on that spoon. "May I help you, Deary?" Pussycat looked over at the woman at the counter of the antique shop. She was squat and stout, with a chin waddle that embraced her neck like a python. Her hair, what was left of it, was decayed red, straggly wisps framing the pink prune that was her face. "Are you Madame Runcible?" Pussycat asked. The woman chuckled. No, I'm afraid not. My great-uncle, Irvin Runcible, was the original owner of this shop, but he passed away long ago. My name is Eliza Narragansett, but you may call me Ellie. May I help you find something?" Pussycat narrowed her eyes on the woman. Even sweet, harmless old ladies could prove to be otherwise. Who knew who the Morbids, if they indeed had a hand in Owl's disappearance, employed to spy for them? Rumor was the Morbids had eyes, ears, and fingers everywhere, not just in England. But this was the only place in all of New York City that carried the name Runcible, Runcible's Antiques and Homewares, and Pussycat was growing desperate for clues. She withdrew the spoon from her pocket and placed it on the counter. The woman adjusted her glasses, inspecting the spoon. A look of bewilderment crossed her face. "Oh my! The spoon from the original Runcible wedding dinner set! My great-uncle had 20 pure silver place settings custom-made for his bride and his wedding guests. Only one of the place settings had the Runcible name engraved in the silverware, for my great-aunt. How did you—" "Do you have the other silverware that goes with this?" The limerick from Owl's purse began a haunting chant in Pussycat's mind. "Do you have the knife or the fork?" Ellie scratched her chins. "A close friend of mine acquired the whole set from the Runcible estate auction when the Runcible sons went bankrupt. Paid a pretty penny for it. That's why I'm surprised you have the spoon. Although it would be like Derry to buy something expensive only to lose it or give it away. How did you come by it?" Pussycat kept a cool expression, despite her temptation to pounce on the woman to strangle the information out of her. "My brother is a business partner of Derry's. Derry let him have it to bring home to me. I collect rare silverware. That's why I would like the rest of the set. Do you have Mr. Derry's address, so I can pay him a visit? My brother has been out on business, and I can't reach him to inquire about Mr. Derry's homestead." "I dare say Deary doesn't much like surprise guests, but I'm sure he'd enjoy a little company. Poor man's alone so much. Used to be such a happy man." Ellie shuffled through a counter drawer, taking out a pencil and paper, and scratched out a list of directions. "He lives right above the Bong Tree Cafe, down on 55th Street. Try the turkey and pea soup. Put a little meat on your bones." Pussycat waited patiently until the owner of the Bong Tree Cafe closed the restaurant and locked the door behind him. Then she made her way to the entrance that led up to the second-floor apartments. She ascended the staircase with soundless footsteps to the apartment number noted in Ellie's directions. On the doorframe was a worn nameplate, D.D. Derry. She knocked and then wrapped her fingers around the pistol tucked into her belt. For all she knew, she was walking right into a snare. No one answered. She reached into her boot, plucking out a lockpick. She jimmied the door easily and stepped into a dark space that carried familiar smells, familiar to her line of work. There was an oil lantern sitting on a table at the far end of the room. Pistol at the ready, she crept across the apartment and picked up the lantern. She intensified the flame and held it before her as she scanned the room in the soft yellow light. There wasn't much. A settee, a dining table, a bookshelf, an armchair, with someone in it. The chair faced away from Pussycat, but she could see the hand resting on the chair's arm. She heard a faint melody coming from the chair, like someone was humming. She aimed her pistol at the chair. "You, in the chair. Move 1 inch and you're a dead man. You're going to tell me what I need to know. Got it?" The chair's occupant didn't answer. The humming continued. "I'm talking to you." Pussycat stepped towards the chair. "Do you own a Runcible fork? Or can I skip ahead and ask what you know of my missing partner? He gave me the spoon. It led me to you. Start talking." By now she was 3 feet from the chair. The humming was, in fact, soft singing, and now she could make out the words. "There was an old Deary down Derry, who loved to see little folks merry." "Are you deaf? I am 2 seconds away from spilling your brains." "So he made them a book, and with laughter they shook at the fun of that Deary down Derry." Pussycat leapt in front of the chair, cocking the hammer of her gun and pointing it straight at the singer. She stopped cold at the sight of a withering man, with full-moon spectacles set before tired eyes. The wrinkles of his face implied this once was a man who laughed and sang and smiled, but now had sunken into moroseness. A silver fork, with the word Runcible engraved in the handle, was sticking out of the crimson, sticky pool in his chest. This was not the first time that Pussycat had seen a bloody body, of course. It wasn't the first time she had seen self-mutilation or even death by fork. But as the man continued to chant, as the life wine dribbled down his front, she felt a sickness swell up inside of her that made her drop her pistol. This wasn't suicide. There was something unseen at work here. This was morbid. She approached the bleeding man, placing her fingertips on his cold, bony hand. "Mr. Derry, can you hear me?" The glazed eyes wandered up towards Pussycat. His lips paused, and then a dusty, creaking sound came from Derry's throat. "Owl." "Owl? Where is he? Did the Morbids do this to you?" Derry's eyes fell. "I was his happiness. I was the part of him the Morbids couldn't touch. The songs, the poems, the paintings, it drove back the Morbids. But they became too strong. They took the songs, they took the stories, but they had no use of me." Pussycat was losing her patience. "I don't understand. Why are the Morbids doing this? Who are they? Tell me, I can find them. I can kill them." Deary weakly shook his head. "The Morbids are sadness. His sadness. They have overtaken him. Once they have him, they have the rest of us." "Who's him? You said something about poems. Owl left me a poem about an old man from New York. Do you know that poem? Who wrote it? Is that who you're talking about?" Deary sunk deeper into the chair, or perhaps he was shrinking. "He went by my name. I was the side of him he never wanted to let go. But he was the real one. I was just a shadow. Find the man who has my name, but it's not his true name." "You're not making any sense." Deary suddenly looked straight at Pussycat. An unsettling smile cracked his face. "Exactly. It's nonsense that you're looking for." There was a scratching at the windows. There was clawing from beneath the floor. There was a suffocating sorrow dripping down from the ceiling. Pussycat knew the Morbids were there. They were there for her. She shoved her hand in her pocket, grasping at the spoon, thinking of Owl and his singing and his dancing and the way he always made her laugh and laugh and laugh. Pussycat was in San Remo on the Mediterranean coast in the Villa Tennyson. It had been 2 months since she left New York, since she barely escaped the Morbids. Now she stood at the foot of a bed, staring at a man wasting away beneath the sheets, a man who looked so much like Mr. Derry, except older and grayer and sadder. She had tracked him down after searching for the author who had for years gone by the pseudonym Derry Down Derry. The name Edward Lear didn't sound half as charming. Lear stared up at the ceiling, hands folded over his chest. Pussycat had heard gossip in town that he was suffering from a heart disease. It only made it easier for the Morbids to do their work on him. "Mr. Lear, did the Morbids take Owl?" Lear was still. "Have the Morbids killed him, or is he still alive?" Lear sighed. Very quietly, he breathed into the stillness. "An owl and a pussycat. They went out to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows." Pussycat felt an intense pang of grief. "I read your story about us, about Owl and me. We're supposed to be together. I think even if the Morbids take us, we won't die. So please, if you would." They dined on mince and slices of quince. "Mr. Lear, let the Morbids take me." Lear became silent. "Let them take me, because they'll take me to where they took Owl. I want to be with him, Mr. Lear. Even if it means sadness overtakes us, at least we'll be sad together. Being sad together is better than being sad alone." The quiet lingered a moment longer. Lear tilted his head towards the foot of the bed. There was no one there. He laid his head back down and smiled. He closed his eyes, whispering, and hand in hand, on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, the moon, they danced by the light of the moon.